Hey there, everybody. Mason West here, as always on Bare Bones. We're just gonna at first. We're gonna vamp a little because we're waiting for Danny to show up. But we wanted to get this thing going, so all you lovely folks in the chat who are already here have a chance to hear some things, right, and just be a part of this. So, if there's any questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. But until then, until Danny gets in, we're gonna talk a little bit and explain what we're doing here. So basically, what we're gonna be doing, we're gonna do a couple different mock drafts. We're gonna do probably every other week, and we're gonna do that all the way up until the actual draft. Week of the draft, week before the draft, we're actually going to do like a live one. Now we're gonna pull up one of the mock draft services and go from there. Speaking of mock draft services, you're going to notice today the picks are a little weird on my end. So the original thought process was for Danny to do one of the mock draft systems. He was going to do Pro Football Focus for this week, and I was going to do Pro Football Network for this week. Funny enough, Pro Football Network seems to not have the Bears picks right. I think if you go in and look, they didn't give the Bears like a 7th round pick, and they gave the Bears like in the 6th round. They gave them the wrong pick. It's a whole thing. You'll see it when we go through the show. So this was realized 3 hours ago. I did all my picks, setting up what we're gonna have today at like 4 a.m. and didn't see that. So long story short, Danny's picks, because he used Pro Football Focus, are going to be accurate. My picks are going to be a little bit off in terms of the exact number that they are. We both ended up, I think he ended up with 11 picks. I ended up with 10 picks. We ended up setting up a rule for this mock, only one trade. Originally, we were thinking about actually doing no trades, but considering where the Bears are at, I mean, is it possible? Yeah, I mean, it's in the realm of possibility, but it's not the most likely scenario. So we decided, you know what, might just skip the one with no trades, and we'll end up going right into doing at least the one trade. Like I said, it's the one trade for this one. In future ones, we'll adjust it. We'll go wild. We're gonna have some guests on, hopefully too, to bring you some different insights. And with this whole thing, always just keeping in mind, there's a lot left to go. Right at this point, we haven't even done the combine yet. We haven't done pro days. You know, they may see some of these guys have injuries. Actually, one of the guys in mine is a perfect example of that. Someone I drafted. You're gonna have to wait and see what that's gonna end up ultimately looking like when we get to him. But I find out there's injuries that are gonna really derail some of these individuals. The interviews are gonna be super important. You know, what looks and just seeing these guys in person. So at the end of the day, take these as more of players that could potentially fit on the Bears and people were interested in, not necessarily, you know, this is what's going to happen. In addition to that, Danny's kind of the bigger film guy. I'll pop up into the film as much as I can, but you know, job doesn't allow that all the time. So I'm going to lean on him a lot during the show. It's going to be real fun seeing what his perspective is on a lot of these prospects, and that's we're also going to bring in guests. A couple people who are down, for example, at the Senior Bowl this week. Hopefully, that'll be in our next show in a couple of weeks. Have him on, and we'll ultimately go from there. Now, as I'm actually going to change my background because I don't like to realize I'm not a big fan of it. Boom. That one's more fun. Eventually, it'll change. And again, if there's any thoughts, questions, ponderings as we get into this, feel free to throw them up. As we still are going to wait for Danny to show up, we're going to pretty much cut this whole beginning part off the show. So if you're going to listening on the podcast, you're not even going to hear this. All you lovely YouTube people and who are here live are the ones who get to hear the shenanigans that are going on right now. There we go. Fine change. That's the pretty background that we're looking for. Oh, another cool side note I would want to throw out there. If you haven't had a chance yet, Brett Coleman, I'm sure most of you know who Brett Coleman is. Kollman. He did a mock offseason for the Bears. And it's an interesting one. I'm going to ask Danny about a couple of nuggets when he does pop on here. But I don't want to give away too much, but obviously does trade with the Colts. He ends up getting their first 3 picks in theory. So for rounds 1, 2, and 3, also a future first rounder and another future pick that I don't remember, in order to move back to pick number 4. And the first thing he actually talks about is another trade, not to move back in the draft again, but to get a offensive tackle, one of the best offensive tackles in the league, and actually traded the future first, so the one that they got in the Colts trade for the 2024, and then I think it was this year's third, in order to get this player. So again, I don't give it all away because I think you should be giving Brett the views. Go ahead and check that out. But one thing I think that highlighted is the flexibility that is potentially present in something like this. There's obviously a lot of stuff floating out there with these mocks, and some of them are crazy. You end up having Bears trading back for 2-3 times and still netting, the Texans first and 12 picks and 3 more future first, and then it goes on and on and on. There's a couple layers to that. I mean, number one, and this is the way that I look at it, at least, I'm just going to use the simulator in terms of what it gives me. I'm not going to say, well, I'm not going to take this certain pick because I think it's less likely to happen. I'm also not going to try to go crazy if I am sending a trade out. For the most part, when I'm doing the mocks, I'm not necessarily sending out a bunch of trades. I'm kind of seeing the ones that come, just trying to let that happen a little bit more naturally than trying to force a bunch of stuff. But like I said, it's all about that flexibility to it, that it's not just about trading back. It's not just about getting rookies. And then there's other ways to get players besides just free agency. That you could trade. And then I would expect for the Bears to trade their first overall pick sooner rather than later. So it's not going to be a draft day trade. Whoever is trying to get to the number 1 pick is going to want to know they have it, so that they can get all their homework done on the player. They're going to do their homework anyway, of course, on all the players, but there's a difference. And you see that a lot, right? You saw that with the Carson Wentz trade, that was done ahead of time. You saw that with the Jared Goff trade, that was done ahead of time. You saw that with the Trey Lance trade, that was done. The Senior Bowls, where a lot of conversations happen. So, I would expect there's a lot ramping up right now over this last week, what was going on there. And so a week or 2, maybe 3 weeks post Super Bowl is where I would say like a window might be that you see that trade go through. And that's the thing for the Bears too. The Bears want that. The Bears want to know where they're sitting, what other flexibility they might have, what moves they can make before the draft, and then during the draft as well. Couple of key notes that happened over this last week that is really important for the Bears. Danny's gonna miss all of this talk, so he doesn't get to talk about this. That's his own fault. Some important stuff to note. Obviously, Tom Brady retiring. So what does that mean? There's 2 thought processes coming off of that retirement. Number 1 is going to be what's going on with Las Vegas. I personally had them pegged as the main Brady destination. I think a lot of people did. There wasn't a secret to that. You'd think McDaniels probably doesn't have the patience to try to wait on a rookie. Obviously, a connection to Tom Brady. It made sense. You have Devontae Adams, you have Darren Waller, a Hunter Renfro. I would expect Josh Jacobs to be gone. His comments, I believe it was the last game, were pretty damning. Where I just don't think that he has any inclination to go back. And that defense is not fan. It's okay. With all that, I mean, it's a solid spot. It made sense. But with that Tom Brady retirement, Vegas is now sitting there saying, well, what do we do now? Devontae Adams had a tweet that made you think that he wants Aaron Rodgers to go there. I think that's big. There was always kind of a question mark in terms of what ultimately was the relationship between Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers when that trade happened. It was known that A, obviously Devontae wanted to get paid, but also B, he did want to play with his good buddy, Derek Carr. So did that rub Aaron the wrong way? Does he even want to go back? Or did they not care? Was he like, hey, Devontae, go get your bag, go have fun in Vegas, do your thing? So Aaron Rodgers is an option, but I have him pegged for the Jets. I would think Derek Carr is going to the Commanders at this point. And so basically there's another empty quarterback seat, but not necessarily a butt to sit in, at least an obvious one. So now you have to go think draft. So it's really interesting, I think, at that point, because it opens up again flexibility for the Bears. So for the sake of argument, and then just play along with this, let's say they trade back to number 4 with the Colts, right? Now all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, well, I love the player that I can get later. I like the ones here, but I could get more later. Could you play the Panthers, who have Frank Reich, who clearly, I think Reich is done with the veteran scenarios. I mean, he went through Phillip Rivers, he went through the Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, probably wants nothing to do with that. Now all of a sudden, are they going to get their rookie? Also, you take a David Tepper. David Tepper, newer owner, bought this team, and ever since then, it's been bad. It's just been bad news bears for this organization with a lot of these their stuff. They've had the Sam Darnolds of the world. They've had the Baker Mayfields, all that jazz, and it hasn't gone well. So I think that they'd be someone that's looking for potentially trading up and trying to get their person, because I don't think they're going to want to sit there waiting and seeing, okay, well, who's going to fall to us? David Tepper, Frank Reich want their guy. Can you play the Panthers off of the Raiders or vice versa, right? Because the Panthers are sitting at 7, the Raiders are sitting at 9. Now all of a sudden the Raiders may want to jump the Panthers in order to get their person, so that they're, again, not sitting there waiting for the dregs to be left over. It really depends on your thought process on the 3rd, 4th prospects. I mean, you have your Bryce Youngs, you have your Strouds, but what about your Will Levis? Does someone fall in love with his intangibles? He's got like a lot of the makeup. If you were going to make someone in a lab, he's got the height, he's got the weights, he's got the arm strength that you want. His decision making kind of sucks. I'm not a huge Will Levis guy, but that's just me. Or if you're, a Colts person, I'm totally a Will Levis person. Totally go get Will Levis, Jim Irsay. Just like you should have gone Jeff Saturday. Great call. But also there's Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's kind of that number 4, number 5, depending on how you have people ranked. What do people think of Anthony Richardson? Are you okay with that quarterback, sitting there? I think Anthony Richardson's going to be solid. He needs time to develop. I don't know that I'm just trying to throw him out there day one. But that all has to come into effect as well. On another lane that really does matter is also what's happening in Tampa Bay. So now that Tom's not there, to my knowledge, the next quarterback up would be Kyle Trask. He was, if anyone remembers maybe because when the Bears just drafted Justin Fields, they didn't actually. No one actually really thought they were going to draft a quarterback that early. I mean, there was like, oh, there's hope. Like people did in mock drafts. I did it too. I was like, yeah, trade up, get Justin Fields. It's going to be great. But it wasn't anyone. We were talking about the Kyle Trask of the world. We're talking about the Kellen Monds of the world. And so I, doing some homework on him, it wasn't great. He's just a guy. So what do you do when you're Tampa? I mean, you have an old, kind of expensive roster, right? You have your Leonard Fournettes, you have your Chris Godwins, who just signed a deal. You have your Mike Evans. So is Tampa Bay going to blow it up? Does that open up another wide receiver that you could trade for on the market that could be a more automatic, little quicker upgrade for you? I know DeAndre Hopkins has been thrown out there. I like the idea of DeAndre Hopkins, obviously coming off of a season where he was suspended for PEDs and kind of hopping around as he had. I would do it. I mean, a 3rd round pick I'd throw for DeAndre. But also, what do you think about Mike Evans? He's always someone that, even before you had Tom Brady there, he was always someone that produced, with Jameis Winston and all that. But he's had some injury stuff going on. He's missed time. Is a Chris Godwin available? Potentially. I would think not, just based on the deal he just got, that if the Buccaneers are going to move someone, they'd be more likely to move on from a Mike Evans than they would be a Chris Godwin. Also, then if you're sitting there as a Bears fan, do you even want Chris Godwin? I mean, yeah, you want like prime, healthy Chris Godwin, but he never really looked fully back after his ACL recovery. And that was true for a couple of guys. I mean, you got the Michael Gallups of the world, who also, it's just too fast. Putting that PT hat on for a second, really, you're not back to 100% until usually at best 2 years out after you've done the surgery. 1 year, you're usually chilling at about 75 to 80%. And that 25% difference is huge when you're talking about an NFL player. That 25% is all the difference between being an elite wide receiver down to an average wide receiver to a bad one. So that's another reason that you might want to stay. You don't want to stay away from Chris. You just don't know what you're getting. Which version are you ultimately going to have, and are you willing to trade the draft capital to make that happen? There are other names that are floating out there in the same scenario, in the same thought process of, the Michael Pittmans. I like Michael Pittman. I don't know that I need to reduce the capital that I'm getting back in a trade for the number 1 pick in order to get Michael Pittman from the Colts. I'd rather just, because maybe they're going to say, well, we're not going to give you the future first or whatever. Give me the future first. I don't know that Michael Pittman is that much better than a Darnell Mooney. I mean, that might be blasphemy. So someone might be sitting there. So that's insane that you're saying that. But I don't think it's that big of a difference. I actually point to is pretty funny. I tweeted out after. Oh no! So yeah, it wasn't AJ Brown, but Devontae Smith made that one-hand catch that wasn't a catch actually on the sideline. Jokingly tweet, half joke, half serious, tweeted out, "Hey, go get me that wide receiver, Mr. Pulls." And then Dr. Michael Risher, who has been on this podcast, right? It works a lot with Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, some of these other guys. Retweeted me and said, "Excuse me, like one of these was actually a catch," and with a picture of Darnell, and he's absolutely right. Darnell Mooney not just had the same still shot as Devontae Smith, but he actually made the catch. So Darnell is a better wide receiver than a lot of people are giving him credit for. They're sleeping on him a bit because he faded into the background, especially with the injury. The end of the season is leaving a bad taste in people's mouths because of how badly it ended. I mean, you have the number 1 pick for a reason. Your team wasn't very good. But Darnell had some highlights. He really did. And if you remember that he didn't get to play alongside Chase Claypool very long. Chase Claypool is another whole conversation that obviously you can have compared to where's he at? Was he worth that trading that second pick that the Bears specific one? Obviously the returns are not good on that so far. There are whispers about whether or not who he's like, what he's like in the locker room, how good is he, how bad is he. I'm interested to see what Chase does with a full year under his belt, and not full year, excuse me, a full offseason under his belt. Will he do what Darnell did? And spend the whole summer essentially with Justin leading up to minicamp and training camp to help improve that dynamic, or is he going to kind of do his thing? Coming out of Pittsburgh, one of the reasons that he was expendable and that they decided to move on from him was maturity issues. There's the play that everyone knows where they were in under 2 minutes, even less than that, and driving down, and he makes the catch, signals, showboats that he got a first down, and then the ball gets kicked and fumbled around, and they lose precious seconds off the clock, and they ended up not being able to get off another play. And now it's not a guarantee they would have won that game if they did, but you got to do everything you can. So clear maturity issues there. Can he grow up? Will the Flus hit system take hold with him at some point? And then if that does happen, does it help Darnell Mooney? Connecting that all back to some draft stuff, there's a good chance that Poles looks at Chase as you can look at him as either the free agency signing for wide receiver. So, you don't go after an Allen Lazard. You don't go in because the free agency class is not great. We've said that on this podcast before. You hear it all over the place. Or do you look at that as one of your draft picks for this year? Like you're saying you drafted Chase Claypool, and does that affect when and where you're going after wide receivers? Because if maybe you didn't have a Chase Claypool, would you have drafted a wide receiver in the 2nd round versus you're going to now look at one in the 3rd or 4th round? Does he change his mind based off of what happened with the Velus Jones situation, right? I mean, Velus Jones had some moments at the end of the year, which I was excited about, happy for him, glad that happened. But, it took a while for those few moments to even appear. So is it better in Poles' mind at this point, Ian Cunningham, et cetera, to go after a guy earlier, someone who has more upside, who isn't, 24 years old when you draft him, and go for someone like, if a Jackson Smith, drops, is there a world that exists where if you can trade back up to get a Quentin Johnson, do you do that? We're going to talk about all that. We're going to have a couple different scenarios as this comes through. Again, just as we wait for Danny to show up. Still waiting. No idea what he's doing. All right, we're getting close. So close. Promise you that. Look, there. I see him backstage. He's about to sit down. He's sitting. Now he's tilting the screen. Now I'm adding him to the
Okay.
2031 is the time that we need to cut off the beginning of this and not post it to a podcast.
Oh, God, that was a nightmare. All right.
Well, we were going to do a whole like intro and like talk about stuff and all that. You now get one sentence to say what is your general impressions about what the NFL news leading up to this?
So salute to general impressions. That player from the Philadelphia Eagles, bad guy. I hope he gets what's coming to him if he's indeed convicted and found guilty of all of his charges. And the Super Bowl should be fun. They were arguably the two best teams the rest of the season after about the week 6 point of the year. And we're getting the two best teams in football facing off in the Super Bowl. So should be a fun time. Again, apologies to all the listeners and everything.
It doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
That happens a lot often where you truly get like the best two teams. So that's pretty cool.
No, it does not. It does not happen.
But we have another show that's going to come on after us, and we have a whole mock thing that we got to get through. So since we're probably going to cut the first 20 minutes of this for podcast listeners, how this was going to work and how it will work in the future. So original game plan was about every 2 weeks, we're going to do a mock draft for you. A couple rules. Danny and I would alternate who does Pro Football Focus, who does Pro Football Network. You can't only, in this one in particular, one trade only. Don't go crazy with it. We were originally maybe going to do like don't do a trade, but at this point, come on now, Bears are going to trade. There's no point for them to be at number one. And don't repeat players. That's another rule. So for those of you who are going to listen to episode 3 of the mocks and you're like, why the heck did neither Danny or Mason take Jalen Carter? It's like, yeah, because we did it probably a week or two ago. So watch the other ones. On that note.
And I mean, the listeners wouldn't be wrong. We are stupid.
Oh, 100%. But on that note, Pro Football Network is broken. I don't know what's going on. So at 4 a.m. this morning, I was doing my picks and I was getting stuff ready and da-da-da-da. I did all my stuff, and you'll see in a second why I spent so much time doing this. But then I get to, and I'm looking at Danny's picks that he sends me, and the numbers are just different. And I was like, wait, did Danny or did I do multiple picks? No. Pro Football Network just doesn't have the right picks for some of them. Like, they don't have like a 7th round pick for the Bears, apparently, for example. They had him at like 220 as one of the picks instead of 210 or something of that nature. So mine are going to look weird because I use Pro Football Network. There are a couple there that are right. Whatever. Danny's going to have all the right ones. We still had about 10 and 11 each. And at the end of the day, it's just about looking at prospects. So,
And we also need to preface this by saying we are both going to be very wrong on these mocks. Mocks are never what you think, especially this early in the process. We're just getting to true draft season for a lot of the analysts and everything. And it's early February. There are guys that are going to rise. There are guys that are going to fall. There's going to be guys you've never heard of, and myself included, who's going to watch a couple hundred of these guys when it's all said and done, that you're going to be like, who? Like, it's
literally
just
one of the guys you sent. I struggled to find a good picture for him, and it was like I didn't think you were a football player, but that's fine.
I refuse to believe you're not a Madden creative player in a draft class. That's what I refuse to.
Essentially. But now I'm going to throw up here what I spent that entire morning doing. This beautiful presentation of our mock drafts.
Oh, I am excited. Look at this. See, guys, this is what you get. Oh, and he's got, oh my God, look at me. He's got me with a beard. So, for reference, I haven't had a beard in 3 years.
Hard to find a picture of you.
There's a reason for that.
So yeah, during this endeavor, I'm gonna be Ryan Poles. Yeah, you can be either Ian Cunningham or Eberflus for obvious reasons.
I think I need to be Eberflus, right? Since I'm the stand for him, I'm the guy who's like, you needed Matt Eberflus.
I would just think because I was like the thicker between the two of us, and so like thick boys ride together between me and Poles.
I really just assumed you were saying that I was white.
See, that's where I would play the little drum thing if I didn't have other sounds queued up. But progressing into our actual mock, so this is Danny's first in terms of the trade he did. So I want to talk through that a little bit, Danny.
Yeah, so I think, full disclosure, that the Colts are the most realistic trading point at this point. The issue I run into is I try to use the charts and I try to get it to where it's an even trade based on point systems and whatnot. And it's just not like feasible because you can take these teams for a ride when they're trading up to that number one pick. Is it possible they get?
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, and it's like I tried to not get too greedy, so I gave them the downgrade to the later fifth, along with the first round pick, and they gave me 4, a second, their fourth rounder, their fifth rounder, and their first rounder next year. And even that's probably on the heavier side of what they'd be willing to part with, if I'm being honest. But it just felt like a move that maybe they'd give it the extra fourth as part of moving up because they're desperate to go get their choice of quarterback.
Yeah, and we talked about that a little bit in that super intro I did. But these simulators are ridiculous, right? I mean, like, you'll see it when you see my trade too. Again, I'm not. If they offer it to me, I'm just gonna do it. It's fine. This is all for fun. This is all just to get an idea of what's available, like what both players. It is what it is. They're just nuts.
Oh, it's absolutely an act in futility. It means nothing. It's for fun.
But first off, we'll look at first with his 4th overall pick. Boom. So why, sir, did you take Mr. Will Anderson Jr.?
So here I had a conundrum because I was almost sure when I was doing this that Jalen Carter was going to be there at 4. Lord behold, after the trade down to 4, Carter was taken by the Arizona Cardinals at number 3. Will Anderson was literally a byproduct of he's arguably the best prospect in this class, regardless of position. He is a fantastic pass rusher. He's got great mobility, transfer speed to power, gets to the quarterback, stops the run. He is ideally one of the better edge prospects in recent years, even above, in my opinion, at this point, probably even higher than someone like Aiden Hutchinson last year, or the guy who went number 1 overall to the Jaguars out of Georgia, whose name I'm currently drawing a blank on. Okay, well, that doesn't matter.
My brain went to Kayvon Thibodeau, and I know that's not it. So
Kayvon Thibodeau is incorrect. He went to the Giants, I believe.
Right. Like, for some reason, my brain went right to him. Yeah. It's like, that's not who.
That's not the right guy. But it'd be hard to get any sort of upset at Will Anderson. He's a fabulous football player, and I think he would do a very fine job for the Chicago Bears going forward. The issue is, yes, Trayvon Walker. Thank you, Skokes. I think the issue you would run into is that I think Matt Eberflus likes bigger, bulkier defensive linemen, especially given they are a 40 front scheme with the cover 2. And he's not all that large. He's 6'2", 6'3", and like 245-ish pounds. And that would have made more sense in Lovey's version of the cover 2, who really prided themselves on smaller, slicker, faster defensive linemen. But if you go look at what he had in Indianapolis when they were really humming with those guys, it was a bigger defensive end, bigger defensive tackles like DeForest Buckner and Grover, something. I forget his Grover Cleveland. That's it. And
is that really his name? Isn't that the name of a president?
It's Grover. God, I am frazzled from getting on this show.
Grover Cleveland, officially one of the best 3 techs ever.
not Glover. Glover Teixeira is a mixed martial artist. Shut up, phone. But he just doesn't fit that mold. But at a certain point, it is talent over everything else, and he is arguably talent and production wise the best player in this draft at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Do you just go with, in theory, someone who's supposed to be this blue chip guy that will transcend the body that you're trying to look for, maybe
Right.
as Eberflus? And there's some concerns because he was so good last year and had some fell off the production a little bit this year. Some people are arguing, they got double team more, but I think if you look at the rates, they're similar. There's stuff. I mean, everyone's going to have their blemishes, but he is, as by most draft pundits, most people, he's a home run pick. So you can't go wrong with that choice.
Cannot go wrong with it. No, I'd be remiss if anyone was actually upset at the Bears landing Will Anderson Jr.
The beginning of the rest of it. Oh my God, it'd be great. So this is the trade I did. So I give away the number one pick. And again, I just took what I was given. Do I think this is going to happen? No, I don't. To give up, this is nuts. Give up 2 first-round picks this year. The pick 33, which is kind of first-ish, and then 2 nuts. I just mainly did this for today. A, because I didn't want to go through and make my own. I just wanted to take what I was given. But also B, to highlight, chill out on the simulators. Like, if I end up seeing another mock that has the Bears making 5 first-round picks this year and kind of some seriousness behind it, I'm going to lose my mind. But that's where I got some of my
You're probably going to lose your mind.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely.
CJ Stroud.
But with that, the Bears are back on the clock. I got to pick number 2, so I didn't fall into, unfortunately, Danny's dilemma. My man, Jalen Carter, was sitting there waiting to be picked and picking up quarterbacks and demolishing them. The tackle are just 6'3", 311 pounds. He has this nice combo of athletic ability, power, violence, and just so many pass rush tools that make him a pretty clear first-round pick. Explosive and viable in all parts of the defense. As a junior this year, he played in 10 games. He missed 5 with an MCL injury, but he contributed on 308 snaps, recorded 18 tackles, 7 assists, and 20 stops. As a pass rusher, he had 25 pressures, 17 QB hurries. He had 5 QB hits and 3 sacks, again, from the D tackle position. 13% of his pass rushes last season created pressure, according to True Media. And they also recorded a tackle on 17.1% of his run defense snaps. He's got pretty amazing change of direction, lateral speed, and he can play really anywhere on that line. 1 tech, 2 3 tech, 5 tech. Great instincts as a pass rusher. But when he does get a little stuck sometimes, when he gets his head up, doesn't always shed to make the play, and doesn't play with some pad level. And then sometimes he has disappeared a little bit. I mean, you saw in the national championship game that, he wasn't necessarily where you thought he would be, on the greatest stage. So what was the reasoning behind that? I can't say. But what I can say is when he does show up, he shows up and wrecks things.
Yes. Monster.
Absolutely.
I think at this point, Mason and I are both in agreement. If we had it our way, Jalen Carter is wearing a Bears uniform after the draft. Like that.
And I think there's a layer to that too, where I don't know if you agree with this, but I think the edge depth is also better than the D tackle depth, and you could potentially still get a solid edge later. But I mean, that was my perspective, but I don't know about what you think about that.
I'll be honest with you. I've only gotten so far within draft prep so far, and I've only gotten through some of the bigger names. And with us doing the Building the Board project on Windy City Gridiron, I've really been focusing on 2 positions that I'm trying to get ahead on before delving into the rest of it. So I've gotten through some of the bigger ones, but I haven't gotten to the middle round guys to really say, yeah, I think the edges are better. The defensive tackles are better, kind of thing. I'm just not comfortable saying that without having the requisite film watched, as it were.
No, and that's fair. You said it earlier in the show. I mean, we're going to get so much more data over the next couple months. I mean, this is just a fun activity to introduce names, and you're absolutely right. To make any outlandish statements would be wrong to do.
Sure.
I get to go again because I had traded. and got another first-round pick because that's very, very likely.
Oh, Big Mason.
Pro Football Network. And on my board sitting there, I had Broderick Jones, another for 315 pounds. There are some draft smart people that are saying that they think that, Jones could end up being the number 1 tackle by draft day, just depending on how the combine goes and everything like that. 2-sport athlete in high school, dominant in basketball, which I think is awesome. He has been reported to hit 19 miles per hour on GPS trackers. In 2022, he played in 13 games and gave up only 8 quarterback hurries, 1 quarterback hit, and didn't allow a sack while playing at left tackle. He has elite length and power, able to torque and hold defenders with one arm, great in space with lateral agility, athletic to use vertical and diagonal sets and pass protection, but also explosive enough to create some steep angles on rushers. Elite grip strength. You rarely see once he gets his mitts on someone that he'll let them go. He only started 19 games though. So you can kind of see it with some of his unrefined technique. Tends to lean and bend at the waist a bit, causing some balance issues, and can be a little over aggressive sometimes. So balance issue, over aggressive, and that means you're falling. I mean, it didn't show in sacks, but you can see that a little bit in the run game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It'd be hard to get mad at that. I think. Oh boy. So I actually have watched this guy, and I like him. So in case you see me looking down, I've got notes here because I'm a nerd and I don't do things on my phone. I do them with pen and paper. So with the second pick and 35th overall, I went with Siaki Ika, the defensive tackle out of Baylor. He is 6'4", 350 plus pounds. So he's kind of built like an oversized fire hydrant. If you look at him, he's just gigantic and not gigantic like in the way of like DeForest Buckner, where he looks like a defensive, like a power forward who's put on way too much muscle. He's like only 6'4" or so, but just all that mass in his midsection and his butt and thighs. He's really well put together. Tremendous power. You see him able to, when he puts his hands on someone, he is physically moving them around a little bit. And you know what? For a guy his size, he does move pretty well. Like he's not like, I don't know who a good comp would be. He's not Eddie Goldman, like the Eddie Goldman we remember of most recent vintage, where it was like he would hold his ground, but he's not really going anywhere. He's just like kind of there. He can do that. He can actually shoot gaps. He gets his body on the ball carrier a lot, and he does actually tend to push the pocket a little bit because he does have these like really long arms that once he engages and commits to pushing forward, he's able to get himself towards the quarterback. Now, he's not without like some issues. That's why I think he might go in the early part of the second round. Unless some team at the end of the first falls in love, but I think this is probably right around his best case scenario, top of the second. Because he is so strong, he does tend to kind of play without technique a lot of times. He's just kind of like, I'm strong, bear move tree kind of thing, but he just doesn't always work for him, like on a consistent basis. And it does seem as though for as good a motor as he can have, endurance might be an issue, which I'm sure, as you well know, Mason, it's probably because he's heavy and moving that much weight and size around makes a body tired. But if they were to walk away with him, I think that'd be tremendous, especially because I think it'd be a mistake in the offseason if they didn't show up at Duran's Payne at the start of free agency with a briefcase full of money to make sure he's a Bear, like kind of thing. And I think those two could even coexist with one another just because of the way that they are both adept pass rushers from the interior position, despite both being more of a quote-unquote nose guard or nose tackle.
Yeah, I think you and I said this multiple times, especially near the end of the year, where there was 1, 2 positions on the defense specifically where you could pencil them in as starters for next year. So, like you said, I mean, yeah, go get a Daron Payne and then follow it up with him. I mean, there's no reason not to. If he's sitting there and you truly think he fits your scheme, like you now have
especially because the run defense was so bad. You all of a sudden put those two in the middle. Daron Payne, people forget because of his 11 sack performance this year, he cut his teeth in the NFL as a run stopper. That's where he made his bones initially. It wasn't until this year that he really became a pass rusher out of that nose tackle position.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to say the least. I mean, that's underselling it. So this one was interesting. It was a combo. I'm putting them together just because we're not double dipping too much on it. I ended up taking this person at pick 33. Danny ended up getting them at pick 54. NL Washington, tight end out of Georgia. I thought it was funny. I have 3 Georgia players in a row. I didn't even realize that until I started making this, and I was like, "Oh, apparently I'm just taking their team. It's fine." But he's
Mason,
massive,
the Georgia
6'7",
Bulldogs,
265 pounds. Oh yeah, huge. Just surround Justin. He was a 5-star recruit in 2020, and he was already at 6'7", 265 at that point, and he's just gotten like bigger, honestly. He had only 26 catches for 417 yards and 2 scores, but that's not his best thing, right? His best thing is this blocking. He operates as a split full blocker on split zone concepts, and Georgia had so many weapons. He wasn't needed as much to be, get a lot of targets, but I mean, he does make the most of his chances. The problem is he's gangly. He doesn't explode out of his breaks, doesn't create a lot of separation. So sometimes he also struggles to win at the pad level and blocking too. The size is a bit like it hurts him sometimes.
So it almost looks like he probably got to that size at like a later age. Like he didn't it's like maybe from 16 to 17 or 17 to 18, he just sprouted. Like I don't know what his background is on that, like his pubescent era of life, but a lot of times it almost looks like he's trying to learn to figure out his body in a sense. Like he's trying to coordinate himself for being this
like a
big
newborn giraffe.
Correct. Like he is a man child, and he's actually got surprisingly soft, natural looking hands. He's not fighting the football, but he is very much a work in progress more than anything. And it's just the physical attributes is what you're banking on.
And I think the thing that's nice about him is like comparing him to like a Kyle Pitts. With Kyle Pitts, he's catching the ball, and that's kind of what you get. And also, that's a whole other conversation because the Falcons basically tried making him this heavy blocker, and he just wasn't a heavy blocker. With Darnell Washington, like he is a blocker first, will very much help your run game, and then if he can produce and use that size to become a big receiver, like I think almost Dallas Goedert, just because how bulky and big Dallas Goedert is, then that's a plus.
So I get it with the Dallas Goedert thing, but Dallas will run away from you. I don't really think Darnell. Separation. I don't think Darnell's going to run away from you.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't have a good comp. I'm trying to think of someone that legitimately does, and he just has this funky combo of that size and some athleticism, but just not the explosiveness. It's weird.
Yeah, I don't know what a good comp for him would be. Because Jimmy Graham was in that same realm of size, but Jimmy would run away from people in his day. I don't know.
He's a unicorn. That's all it is to him.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching it. He reminded me almost of I know the size isn't, but it almost reminded me the way he plays of Charles Barkley in football pads. Just this big physical guy. Just give me the ball and get out of my damn way.
What a backhanded compliment. I mean, when you compare someone to the round mound of pound, I don't know that you're happy about it.
Oh yeah, only one of the 70, 50 or so greatest basketball players ever is being compared to you in football cleats. God, what a problem.
Oh, come on, man.
was that your well, and you can't spell terrible correctly or say it right.
He says that constantly.
TRBL, terrible.
That's terrible.
Okay. What
All
are
right,
we
back to
doing
me.
here?
Round 2, pick
Jesus.
53. We're starting to get to the weird part of the draft where the picks aren't going to make some sense on my end, so just bear with me. Again, Pro Football Network, if you're listening to this, because I know you listen to all of our content, obviously. Who doesn't listen to our content? Fix your stuff and get back to me, because I would like to have multiple models, but apparently I'm not going to get there. I went back to the trenches, and I'm going to take John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmitz, off center, Minnesota, 6'4", 320 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit, played high school football in Homewood Flossmoor High School in Flossmoor, Illinois. He was also a high school wrestler, so guy after my own heart. He can get outside the one technique off a snap pretty well when moving laterally, which shows great athleticism for a center. He can also give himself enough space to flip his hips, which is pretty tough in those tight trenches. There's a lateral burst out of his stance, allows him to work across his face as well. He's got the IQ to play center in the NFL. Powerful center that offers the kind of stature that would shine in inside zone and between the tackle run gap system. Problem is he's not very dynamic. I mean, he's not very explosive, needs to work on his pad level, and he will be 24 years old as a rookie.
He's probably the best zone center prospect in this draft as well, which they seem to do a lot of here in Chicago, at least a vintage. So I wouldn't be shocked if they like him. I'm interested to see how he measures out and everything once the official measurements come out, because that sort of stuff does, especially for linemen, matter. And we know that colleges lie about size and weight all the time.
Oh, 100%. So, yeah, the combine's going to be big for him, seeing what that looks like. Obviously, we don't know what the Bears are going to do in free agency. But when you look ahead to what that could look like, I don't know that anyone is like wowed by the center options. You're probably going to go get a veteran that you're like okay with and then probably draft someone. And so why not get who arguably could be the best center in the league? The age thing is annoying, I guess, at being 24. But at the end of the day, are you that worried about your center and going to your second contract and all that jazz?
So it's also, I'm admittedly an ageist fanalist. I don't like old rookies, but when it comes to linemen, specifically on the offensive line, they tend to have longer careers as it is, so I can live with it a little more, especially at the back end of the second round for a guy that could theoretically walk in and just be your day one center.
Yeah. One of the few times that the ageism is not as important.
Correct.
Danny, you're right. Pick 64.
Ooh. Okay. You're going to get me to gush because
Talk about this man.
This is Dian Henley from Washington State by way of UNLV, if memory serves. So he is probably the modern era, or this era's prototypical linebacker, about 6'2", 6'3", 230, 35 pounds, something like that. Tremendous athlete. He's got good, like if you look at it, even looking at his picture, he's pretty well filled out muscularly, got, the big hips, broad chest, and he's got really long arms, which is something you have to keep in mind when it comes to the linebackers for Matt Eberflus specifically, because what was the big thing with Bobby Okereke and Shaq Leonard? Long arms, real long, almost like tree vines attached to their shoulders. He's really good in coverage. He still is learning the art behind read and react versus just kind of guessing where he's going, but he's just such an athletic problem at this point in his career where it's just like he can get away with it. And I really like what he could be in this system, specifically at that will position. And I just think that he would almost be tailor-made for this coaching staff, given this front office's acumen and want for athletic specimens and the physical profile that Eberflus seems to covet in his linebackers. I think that would be almost like a match made in heaven between the two. Yeah,
I mean, he's that hybrid linebacker that the NFL is starting to move to. Is he the greatest run stuffer stack linebacker in the world? No, but that's probably not what we're going to ask him to do.
He tries though. He does come downhill with some thunder, and he gives it his best. But that's not what he's built for.
Exactly.
And if the will linebacker, the way we know that the position works, the tackles are supposed to be funneling the ball carrier to him. He's not going to be taking, theoretically, a lot of head-on blocks on. He's going to be there to clean up.
And that's why you have a Jack Sanborn, to just be in the way, and then you let him do all the other work.
Oh, Jack.
I'm back up. Round 3, pick 64. Stuck with the offense. Zach Charbonnet, running back, UCLA, 6'1", 220. Kind of a quiet demeanor guy when you watch interviews on him. But when he gets on the field, there's like a switch that flips, and he just runs nasty. Is a senior in 2022, played in 10 games, ran for 1,358 yards on 194 carries, averaging 7 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns, only 1 fumble. And the passing game, he had 37 receptions for 320 yards. He's not really a shifty guy. He's just going to run through you. It's just these north-south, has the feet and feel to run between the tackles to the open field. Pretty good vision. Really good contact balance. Hard to bring down. You're not going to get him with an arm tackle very much just because of his leg churn. Like I said, workhouse type mentality, hard runner. Doesn't have great change of direction when he goes. He definitely slows down. His acceleration is a little more questionable. So he's more like fast and quick. He's not going to make him miss. Again, he's just going to run through you. And he needs to work on his pass protection, which if you've heard that before, that might be a problem considering, at a minimum, then you have him, Khalil Herbert, whoever you have as your other probably free agent running back acquisition. That other one better be able to block someone.
That's one of my favorite picks that you've made so far, aside from Jalen Carter, because I think from the running backs I've watched, he's probably the best fit, in my opinion, for the offensive system that Getsy is trying to run in Chicago. I just love the way he is almost like drop in, and he's fine. Don't worry about him.
Yeah, I think he's someone that could push for, the rookie running back of the year kind of guy, just in the right sit. He's just going to get yards. He's going to get yards and scores. That's the thing.
And I think if memory serves, he got to UCLA, but he was at Ohio State prior, wasn't he? Charbonnet? I could be making that up, but for some reason I thought he was.
Yes, actually. I forgot to throw that up. I think you're right. I have to double check on that. I pretty much pulled more of his UCLA stuff. I haven't really watched. Yeah, I watched like mainly this year's film on him. I haven't gone back too far. Huh. Your turn. Round 4. Pick 103.
A.T. Pelly. Not like the city in France. That's Paris. This is Perry. I don't know what is wrong with me, but there's a lot of stuff. So, first thing that pops up.
That was just awful.
It was. I don't even deserve the first thing that
I'm not
really
that out for that.
The first thing that really I think catches my eye when I watch AT is the sheer size of him. He's probably every bit of 6'4.5", 6'5". He's a big human being, but he moves like a smaller wide receiver. Like, it's really smooth, and he gets up on guys on him that are covering him very quick if they're in off coverage. Very strong, natural hands catcher. Just his issue was that he played at Wake Forest. Like, they're not a great program. You're left wanting a lot, but he does have natural playmaking instincts. He high points the ball well. He competes after the catch, as evidenced by his little celebration here in the picture Mason found of him to throw in our slideshow. And what I really like is something that I think the Bears like too. It's a big reason why I believe they traded for Claypool. I think they like guys that compete after the catch in terms of running hard and trying to make something happen in the run after catch thing. And not that it's a comparison for player, but it almost reminds me a bit of the way Golden Tate used to run after the catch, where he would just, like, it was just bat out of hell, like, I want more yards kind of thing. And I like that about him. Now, he is a little stiff and lacks a little bit of high-end athleticism in terms of, like, change of direction, stop, start, and ability to cut and go. But that's, I think, part of the nature of just his size. He is just big. I mean, that's a 6'5" receiver. That's a really, tall guy out there on the edge. So I think he'd be a really nice fit in this offense, but you're going to have to be patient with him. Especially, not only is he a rookie, potentially, he is a mid-round rookie. I think we've just been so spoiled with wide receivers these past few years, with Jamar Chase, amongst others, just coming in and producing at such a high level right away. We don't remember that it takes a year or two for these guys to acclimate to the NFL.
That's a really good point you bring up. You almost fall into this unfortunate thing. Like, I think, for example, Jalen Johnson and Cole Kmet had a little bit of this where, because the Bears didn't have their first round pick that year, you were like, okay, you're now like, you had such high expectations for those two to contribute right away and be awesome. Mm-hmm. And in theory, he's now in your mock that you have, like, he's the main, like, the little eye candy of wide receiver that you're bringing in for the offseason. So everyone's going to look at him and be like, okay, you're the guy that got brought in. What are you going to do for us?
Yeah,
and you can't do that.
It's like the Bob's interviewing, what's his name, in Office Space. So what exactly is it that you do here?
You got to give him time. He is a fourth round pick that needs to develop from Wake Forest.
Now, in theory, this is, again, just my personal opinion. I think they're going to double dip at wide receiver in free agency. I just do. And we also have to get out of our minds that this receiver room is going to go from awful to great in one offseason. Them just becoming passable with like a bunch of B's and C's for him to throw to is a victory. Like, personally, what I would do if I were the Bears, I would sign both DJ Chark and not Amon-Ra St. Brown. I wish he was available. And Lazard from Green Bay, and just get him a bunch of passable targets to have to throw to. That's what I would do, but it remains to be seen what's going to actually happen.
Yes, that wide receiver room is going to look very different. It's just a matter of how different. I'm back up. Actually, same pick round 4, pick 103. I flipped back to the defensive side of the ball to Mr. DJ, edge out of Oregon. 6'4", 270 pounds. It's just a large individual. He's been contributing for a while now. As a junior, played in 9 games on 152 snaps, and recorded 10 tackles, 1 assist, and 8 stops. Pass rusher, he had 5 pressures, 3 QB hits, and a sack in, again, only those 9 games. And then in 2022, he was able to get 20 tackles, 10 assists, 17 stops, and even had like a pass breakup. Didn't get an interception, but the QB rating went when targeted of a 95.5, which is not bad for a pass rusher. And he had 20 total pressures, 21 QB hurries, 2 QB hits, and 5 sacks in that last season. He's a pretty flexible dude, got some really nice athletic skills and top end speed for his size. He can drop into the zone if needed, as I described earlier. He has powerful hands to hit blockers, disrupts plays in the backfield regularly. Part of the problem is with all this athleticism and this nose for trying to get to the quarterback, he kind of dips on the run sometimes and just says, "Nah, I'm going to do some other stuff." And he also has some pretty long arms and a pretty narrow waist on that frame. So his anchor is a little funky. He can get knocked off if you have the right tackle or block thrown at him. And while walking off the field at Resser Stadium after a loss to the Beavers, he appeared to punch an Oregon State fan in the back of the head before being dragged away from the situation by Oregon staffers. It's currently unclear if he will face any discipline or if authorities will get involved. So knowing polls and Eberflus and all that, they may not even want to get mixed up in that situation.
It's fair.
And that's the thing too. We're now getting to the part of the draft where Danny's going to start saying people I have no idea who they are, and I'm going to start saying people that Danny currently doesn't know who they are. So it just is what it is. Talk to us in 2 months, 3 months. But Danny knows if you pick 106 in round 4.
This is Chase Brown, running back from University of Illinois by way of Canada, I believe. So the first thing that stands out to me about Chase Brown is that he is built the part. He's 5'11", 200-plus pounds, and he looks like an NFL running back. And then you turn him on and you start watching a lot of the Big Ten matchups, and he just accelerates and hits the hole. He gets to top gear and he just goes. A lot in this way, in the same vein as Khalil Herbert. Khalil Herbert's no nonsense. Get to the hole, get upfield. I think Chase might be a little bit more twitchy than Khalil Herbert, which is saying something, but it's not like it's night and day. Like, oh, you can totally tell. Where he separates himself from Khalil is that he has very natural hands. He's a threat in the pass game. You have to account for him taking the top off the defense. And something that I always look for going into the college season is Bruce Feldman's freaks list of the best athletic freaks in college football. He was on this list. Something that I think this Bears front office very much values, athletic prowess, not just guys that are football players. So you factor all that in. You factor in college production, the fact that he's a good catcher of the football, productive in the run, scores touchdowns, et cetera, et cetera. I think Brown would be very, very good in this system, but I just don't know where his value is. Because once you start getting past those elite running backs in the NFL draft, it's kind of just choose your flavor. I like Chase Brown. Maybe it's because I just have easier access to him watching him live before going back and watching film because I live in Chicago kind of thing. Or is it because I just genuinely think he is the next best in that second or third tier of running backs? I don't know the answer to the question yet. What I do know is I like his game. I like what he brings to the table. And I think he does have capability of being an almost every down back because of his ability to both run and catch. And he has the frame seemingly to stand up to it.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a valid point too, where proximity and accessibility. I mean, there's a reason why local guys, whether it's because they grew up, they were high school, their college was local, end up on local teams. It's because, not just you get combine and pro days are more successful, but then you have the local workouts that also happen. I wouldn't be surprised if a Chase Brown pops into one of those, and you just have more eyes. The more eyes, more often you get seen on a team, whether it's drafted or as an undrafted free agent for some of the guys later in this process. So it's an absolutely valid point.
Yeah, I like Chase. I think he'd be a nice fit here.
I'm back up, round 4, pick 134. I'm taking Parker Washington.
I love Parker.
One thing I was confused by was the fact I was confused that he was available here. Again, this is probably just also a difference of the simulator I used. So that, because I think you see him going sometimes earlier, but a lot of draft beatniks are, saying early day 3, late day 2 kind of guy as of right now. 5'10", 207 pounds, versatile wide receiver that plays well in the slot. 2022, he had 46 receptions for 611 yards and 2 touchdowns. Great hands and contact balance. He's like a slippery mobility, strong acceleration, and a pretty creative runner without the ball in his hand. He's a really dense player. He's almost like a running back playing wide receiver in a way. I mean, he was an important part of that Penn State team, but he was never like the dude. That was part of his problem. He's cousins, I believe, with Jahan Dotson, who was there. He was always kind of second fiddle. But he does also have experience as a kick returner, which is nice. And he had an injury near the end of the season that hurt his development. It was never a disclosed injury. So I have no idea what he had. No one's talking about it. Couldn't find anything. But I think he's an interesting guy, especially to be able to play out of the slot and give Justin an option in that position.
Sure. He did pop up last year when I was evaluating Jahan Dotson. And anyone who remembers listening to Lunch Pail last year with Jacob and I knows how big a fan of Jahan Dotson I was. So maybe it's just becoming my brand that if you're a Penn State wide receiver, I'm probably going to like you more than I should between him and KJ Hamler the year prior, both of whom were very much coveted by me. So I'm with you. Parker Washington at this point in the draft would just be an absolute steal.
Yeah, I just couldn't not take him. It was just one of those things. Plus, I needed a wide receiver. I realized I had gone almost every position. Danny, back up. Round 5.
Oh, here we go.
137. You guys, who I am jealous you had sitting there because I did not.
So Owen Pappo. I'm double dipping at linebacker because, like I said, I think a lot of the Bears' financial resources in the free agent class are going to be committed to the offense, and the Bears need almost a whole new front seven aside from Jack Sanborn. Part of the front seven is 3 linebackers in this scheme. Owen Pappo is another one who is on Bruce Feldman's freak list. He allegedly runs in the 4.3s. The only way I can describe him based on what I've watched is uncontrolled chaos. He is fast. He is unbelievably athletic. The guy is just an unguided, uncalibrated heat-seeking missile. He has no idea where he's going. It's just cool. I'm going to guess the ball is going this way. Wrong way. Oops. Let me just go chase the ball now. And there's nothing wrong with that. The intensity and the physicality and physical abilities that he has at this point in the draft would be unbelievable to just take a gamble on, because I like Pappo as just a physical traits prospect. I'm not going to sit here and say he's got some sort of unbelievable football IQ and acumen in that way. Not like when you would watch Jack Sanborn or guys of that ilk coming out of college. And Sanborn is not the prospect Pappo was because he doesn't have these kind of traits. And coaches are always going to talk themselves into, I can develop these traits. That's what he would be. That being said, I think PFF is drunk in thinking he's going to be into the middle of round 5. He's probably going to be a 3rd or 4th round pick, but I would love if that were the pick at this juncture. I think he's a hell of an intriguing prospect who just has a lot more work to do, and people are going to see the combine numbers and the pro day numbers and a lot of the highlight reel plays that he makes because he's just such a physical freak, and not take into account that he does have a lot of work left to do.
I think you highlighted it perfectly, Danny. You take a Jack Sanborn who was the consummate professional, almost you can say, in college, was always in the right place at the right time. You could insert him in whenever you needed to, and he went undrafted because he just didn't have those measurables. He didn't have the explosiveness, all that you want in your draft pick. Versus with Owen, it's the complete opposite. And I agree that he was gone. I was looking and I couldn't snag him. Having him in round 5 was just impossible, at least in the setup I had. So I would agree that he's going to be gone earlier because someone's going to see all those measurables. They're going to see that tape and say, I'm going to target that missile. I'm going to be the one that has the control.
I can calibrate him. Let me just have him.
Exactly. So I want to highlight again, Danny and I did this separately. So I did mine at like 4 a.m. this morning, and then he sent me his at noon. I mean, that's one of the reasons why my pick numbers are all funky, because I didn't want to make adjustments when I had other stuff going on. I also took Dan Henley. It just happened to be that he was sitting there at pick 5, around 5, and pick 137. So I don't want to spend too much time diving in because Danny did a pretty good job talking about him already. But yeah, he originally committed to Nevada back in 2017, spent his first few seasons on the offensive side of the ball as a wide receiver, 17 receptions for 232 yards and 3 touchdowns across those 2 years, converted to defense. He had 50 tackles, 4 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and an interception in 2022. I mean, he's just such a twitchy athlete, dynamic step. Again, he's going to be that hybrid option. He's got a nose for the ball, too. He just always ends up around it no matter what. But as Danny highlighted, his body size is okay, but he's an explosive finisher. He'll struggle a bit as a stack defender, but you're not asking him to do that. You're asking him to be the one that you have a nice defensive line in front of you. You have another linebacker there, and he's just cleaning things up, scorching through gaps. So I also like Henley in the early stages of this process. Danny, round 5, pick 140, got another wide receiver.
Yeah, so this was a value pick for me. I think Xavier Hutchinson is highly undervalued and really a better, if not more exciting prospect for me personally than A.T. Perry is. He's a true X receiver, long, just productive despite having the worst version of Brock Purdy near the end of his Iowa State tenure. Whoever the left-handed quarterback is in Iowa State right now, whose name I have no idea who he is, and he uses his length and his body, and while he's not fast, he's really smooth looking. Like, he just gets in and out real easy, and he runs well after the catch. And I just think if you could potentially walk away with both him in this scenario for me, both him and A.T. Perry, these bigger, longer-armed wide receivers who make defenders make a business decision for them after the catch because of their size and their ability to get after it post the catch, that I think that's just great. And he's a deep threat. He wins 50-50 balls. They didn't ask him to do much in the way of a complicated route tree there in Ames, but Xavier Hutchinson is one of my early leaders for like just a personal favorite to watch at the wide receiver position in this draft class.
Yeah, I specifically picked this picture for him because this is the kind of wide receiver that Justin needs. Someone who's got a radius, someone who's going to be able to make these tough catches, because outside of Darnell Mooney, you really didn't see very much of that. And Cole Kmet on that one really crazy seam pass where he got like flipped around and still held onto the ball. So I don't know much I know a little bit about Hutchinson, but the little I know, I agree. Like, he could be have some late round value. I'm back up round 5, pick 159, and potentially a surprise pick here. Quarter. Someone I know that is actually one of Danny's favorites, one of my favorites. DTR, as many know him. Yep, Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA, 6'1", 205 pounds. He was a star quarterback at Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, earning 4-star billing as a recruit and a spot on the Under Armour All-American team. He had interest from schools like Alabama, but Chip Kelly was able to pull him to UCLA. During his 5 years as a Bruins quarterback, Thompson-Robinson completed 844 of 1,300-ish passes for over 10,000 yards, 86 touchdowns, and only 33 interceptions. He added 1,800 yards and 27 touchdowns on the ground. He's got great mobility, above average, but not elite arm talent. He's explosive, high-energy athlete who can create at an extremely high level. Generates some pretty solid velocity with a snappy release for those short to intermediate routes. Can adjust his arm angle and generate velocity off the platform. He possesses arm strength necessary to drive passes downfield, even when doing little fadeaways. Problem is, his footwork can get kind of uncontrolled, even frenetic at times, and he kind of invites chaos to the offensive side of the ball and some questionable decision making. I like him from the idea just of having a quarterback that you don't have to change your game plan entirely if your quarterback goes out, gets injured, whatever the case may be. I like the idea of developing a quarterback. I like the idea of, and having options. I don't like the idea of having Trevor Siemian as my backup quarterback.
I'm not thoroughly convinced he's not 76 years old, though. I feel like every game, every year, is like Dorian Thompson-Robinson is still the starting quarterback of UCLA. Like, when is he leaving? It felt like almost like, do you remember JT Barrett at Ohio State, where it was like every year JT Barrett was the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes? It's like, is he leaving ever? Like, I don't think he's real at this point. He's just he never is leaving.
And that does add to it. I mean, there's a reason why he's a 5th round pick, right? It's right. There's a ceiling to it, whether it's because of him specifically, because of the UCLA offense and Chip Kelly, but he's, for someone who, again, threw for 86 touchdowns and 33 interceptions, there's a reason why he's not being billed as a top quarterback after 5 years.
Sure.
Round 6, pick 178.
Just to kind of get this question out of the way, I see that just got posted over here a couple minutes ago. Which wide receivers have the potential to be this year's Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase? There is not one in this class of those two.
There is absolutely not.
No. And again, I think those guys are few and far between. We've just been so spoiled of recent vintage with one guy that does that. It's just not a fair expectation to put on these kids.
Well, and yeah, even So there isn't a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Julio Jones talent. And then even with that, a Justin Jefferson did some crazy things coming in his rookie year and doing what he did. Look at someone, I don't know, take a Cooper Kupp. It took him time to become Cooper Kupp. I remember I made the mistake of drafting him a year early in my fantasy team for that reason, because I was like, I think he's going to be great. And then he sat on my bench because never did. And then the next year he became Cooper Kupp. So these guys take time.
Mm-hmm. All right, round 6. Okay. This is Nick Broker, Ole Miss guard. So the thing I love most about him is, A, I don't think he's going to be available here, but the value is too insane to pass up. B, Tevin Jenkins, that kind of mold of attitude is what he plays with. He gets to you like a bully. He's mean. He's pissed off. He's mad. He wants nothing to do with you getting near his quarterback or his running back. He effectively feels like he will die before he lets his quarterback get hit. He has just got a mean streak. And then you start watching him actually move around and play. He's a very natural knee bender, fluid hips. He moves well. He's got light feet. He's almost like a dancing bear for a guy. I believe he's listed at 6'5", 305 or so pounds. So he's a little lighter on the lighter side as a guard, but for this scheme, that's okay. And it's probably what allows him to move around so well. He's always looking for work. So say he passes off one guy or his assignment, he's always looking for the next guy to try and block. It's just how he's wired. Still needs a little work in his pass sets and pass protection. So he is much more of a block of especially with his athleticism and his ability to maul in the run game. I would say he's actually a perfect fit almost for the zone run scheme that they're utilizing here in Chicago. I don't think he'll be available in round 6. I just don't. I think he's too good. But I really like his fit here, especially when you factor in the mentality above everything. Hypothetically, say you were to get him and then sign the right tackle from Atlanta, whose name I'm blanking on at this moment, McGarry, right? So you would be able to have a bunch of these guys who just are playing with a mean, nasty demeanor. And that's something I think is undersold a little bit when you're talking about offensive and defensive line play because of the very nature of those positions.
Yeah, I don't know who this guy is. So all that stuff that Danny said sounds great.
Sounds awesome, yeah. And because of his athleticism and his technique right up at this juncture, he'd almost be like dropping in play, I feel like, at this point in time.
Danny gets to go again because, again, my draft is weird.
My draft is weird. All right, so B.J. Thompson was purely – I had minimal knowledge on him. I know he played defensive back, I guess, in high school before getting to Stephen F. Austin, where they bulked him up to around allegedly 240 or so. I've watched very little on him, but from what I've read on him, he is just an athletic freak. Apparently, he's going to test in the 4.4 area, which means he's got a lightning first step coming out of his stance. So it's really just a traits-based pick. I have no idea where he's going to go in the draft. If he tests that well, I could theoretically see him getting bumped up as high as round 3 or 4, just because it's like, oh my God, if we can just harness this guy's ability similarly how we were talking earlier. But I don't really have much to say. He's a little undersized, clearly, especially transitioning from safety or defensive back to edge, similar to Dominique Robinson last year coming out of Miami, Ohio. But the traits are there physically. It would just be a obvious just lottery ticket in the 6th round.
It's funny because when I was looking for a picture for him, I had to quadruple check I was picking the right person because he just didn't look like an edge. You know, like we're talking about like all these other guys higher up, like DJ Johnson looks gigantic at like 270. You talk about what Will Anderson looks like, just the mold. And I was like, oh, you look. I straight up thought he was a linebacker or like a corner, like from the picture. So it is funny just how that works where he got shifted to.
Mm-hmm.
My final pick, round 6, 210, because I don't have a because again, Pro Football Network didn't want me to have a 7th rounder. I have Malik Knowles. He wide receiver out of Kansas State, 6'3", 200 pounds. As a junior, played in 13 games, had 9 receptions for 441 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns. But he also had 2 kickoff return touchdowns, and those are the second highest in the country. He had a solid senior season, playing all 14 games, 48 receptions, 725 yards, and also 2 receiving touchdowns. He had a second-team All-American kick return in 2021 and was a preseason All-American this year. He was moving a bit between X and Z receiver, but projects more to be a Z. Average acceleration speed, but he relies on his size, that 6'3" frame to create separation. And he does struggle to create that separation off the line of scrimmage, especially if someone gets their hands on him. But he can create the separation on short routes using some wiggle. As a route runner, he's but there's definitely some room to grow. This was just hey, you're a decent frame receiver who can clearly do some returning. Can you help us there? Because when you're picking in the 6th, 7th round, you got to be able to contribute on special teams. I don't need Khalil Herbert back there doing kick returns anymore, and the Bears don't have an answer at punt return currently.
Yeah, whatever value you can find later in the draft, that's what it's about.
Danny, round 7, pick 220, and 3 purple teams in a row.
All right. And so this is kind of one that I picked because I think he's a scheme fit based on what he does and doesn't do well. Cameron Mitchell, Northwestern University by way of Bolingbrook High School. Very natural ball skills, isn't afraid to get up and play physical with someone at the line of scrimmage, but I don't think that'll be his game in the NFL because while he is quick in a short area and while he is physical, I don't think he necessarily has the long speed or the twitchiness, as it were, to go make up for a mistake if he whiffs or gets just flat out beat, which with the way the NFL is, that you're designed to get beat by offensive players. It's just how it is. He looks to have pretty good leaping ability to make, even though he's not like the fastest guy, which I'm sure is part of the reason why he has good ball skills. He's able to fight back and, get up on 50-50 balls and separate them. Like I said, he's not overly fast. He is when I say he's physical and handsy, it'll cost him at the NFL level if he tries playing the same way there that he did in the Wildcat uniform, because it's his game. He likes to be a presence and make sure he's there. He's going to have to learn how to effectively commit pass interference and do the hand fighting thing without actually getting flagged for it all too often. He also has a tendency to bite on double moves and some of your more slug-o routes and stuff like that, where he has to sit down. He doesn't have the best route recognition, I guess is how I would phrase it. So he's limited, which is why he's a 7th round pick. I think with his motor and his physicality, if nothing else, he could be able to contribute on special teams. But I think this is probably about right for him, and he's obviously a smart kid. Northwestern doesn't take dumb players. It's part of their thing in terms of recruiting. That's why they'll never have a great team, because they don't take dummies.
How dare they have those morals?
How dare they have academic standards that they abide by? Fun player, though. He is physical.
That is breakdown of our mock draft. So you can see here, mine's on the left, Danny's on the right. You can see who we got. Looks like Danny got a solid grade over there. They didn't like your Chase Brown pick. PFF just not a big fan of the Brown guy.
Well, are you accusing PFF of being racist, Mason?
Oh, that was the joke I was going for. So overall, I mean, it's funny. It's funny how there's similarities here. I got Darnell Washington a bit earlier than Danny did, but we both got him. The fact that we both got Diane Henley, which I mean, I don't know how many people currently listening to this even know who that is, and we happen to attach to that individual.
I mean, after you get past the first 3 or 4 guys for both of us, how many people know who any of these guys are?
Right. Exactly. But we're going to do this, like I said, every like two weeks or so. Just going to run through, give you guys a breakdown of some players to keep an eye on, people that we think might fit, that might be able to help the Bears out. And I say this because I know Danny and I talked about it off, camera and all that jazz. Don't freak out about the trades and this, that, and the other, but at the same time, like be conscientious and keep expectations normal. If the Bears don't walk away with 7 first-round picks, that's normal. Totally fine.
Also, just really go look historically at what these picks typically go for. You'll get a 1, maybe a 3 next year, their 1, and then a couple of maybe their 2, and then like a 4. It's never what you think it is. But
and then the thing I kind of talked about a little earlier too, before Danny popped on, was the interest of the flexibility. It's yes, maybe you do a pick where like let's look at Danny's over there where you get that's the haul you get, but do you flip that future first for an impact player right now? Do you flip that future first for a disgruntled wide receiver that in the next 2 months someone gets pissy and you flip that for a tackle that you're really happy about? Things like that. So look more for that versus pure draft haul.
Mm-hmm. It's all about flexibility. And the other thing with the draft is, God, this is my lunch pail disclaimer that I give with Jacob every time we record that. It's drafting is art, not science. There's certain baselines that are put in place that give you a better idea to see if a guy is going to pan out or not. But at the end of the day, it's just like, it's a guessing game based on what your style of art is. And does this guy fit does this guy fit in your living room? Does this guy fit in your kitchen? Like, I can't stress that enough. Like, some guys may not work out here. Some guys may. Some guys may have worked out somewhere else, but they don't work out here. Just don't get too attached to what you think a player should be, because you never know how it's going to work out.
And as a reminder, if you're listening to this in podcast form, watch it on YouTube, watch it on the Twitter feed. That way you're going to get to see all the stuff we're throwing up here, whether it's, these final results. I'm not going to sit here and read them all. You just listen to the podcast. Or if you want to watch it, you can do it yourself. On that note, they did your boy Will Anderson dirty with this picture they have of him. Like, it looks like he's just surprised to be there.
I was thinking the same thing when I sent you that screenshot. I was like, man, they really don't like Will Anderson, do they?
Like, they didn't have that single outing on file. Apparently, that was the one.
They couldn't even just text Will's agent real quick, like, "Hey, can we just get like a face shot of him, please? Thanks."
But that's what we have for today. Hopefully, you enjoyed hearing this. Like I said, we'll be back. We're going to do it again. We will pretty much probably just only use PFF from this point on for hoping obvious reasons at this point. And don't expect again. You won't see me draft Jalen Carter again. You will not see, unfortunately, Danny draft A.T. Perry again. We're only going to do one-offs for every single one until the final one, when we'll do a live one. We'll have the thing up there. Brett, Danny, and I will be the brain trust discussing what trade to do or not do and this, that, and the other. And we'll have a grand time before the actual draft. But any final thought?
No. Please, listeners, hold us to it. If you see us pick someone else that we already used, let us know, because there are a lot of players flying. When you factor in we're each probably going to have at least 9 picks each of these, it's going to be hard to not repeat players. But it's an act in us, A, having to be forced into watching more of these guys, and B, give you guys a better idea of who they are. So thanks as always for tuning in.
Yeah, go ahead and watch. I think right now on ESPN they have like some dodgeball and golf and stuff. Best catch. Go watch that. Go enjoy some stupid football. But
ESPN
that's all we
8
got.
Ocho.
Bear down. Ocho. Bear down.